Hello everyone and welcome. Today we are diving into another truly horrific case. If you would like to support my channel, please subscribe and stay active. That really helps me a lot. I would be truly grateful to you for that. Let's get started. There are few people in the world who have never experienced rejection. Some people take it calmly and move on, while others remember the rejection for the rest of their lives. What do you think a rejected man is willing to do? I just wanted to see you naked. That's how the man explained it. He was rejected. This year was supposed to be the most significant one for the young student. Two important events were coming up that would completely change her life. But her journey as a bridesmaid to the wedding ended tragically. Today's story happened in August 2012 in Plainfield, a city in Will and Kendall counties in Illinois, USA. Let's go back more than 12 years. Before you stands 21-year-old Alisha Bromfield. Joliet was located about 15 km from Plainfield. Alisha was one of 5 children, but despite all the difficulties, she always found a reason to enjoy life. She took all problems with ease, laughed, and inspired others with her optimism. Since she had younger brothers and sisters, she got used to solving her problems on her own and not upsetting her parents over small things. This habit cost her her life. When the incident occurred, Alisha was in her final year at Joliet Catholic Academy and was studying at Western Illinois University. She only had a few months left to complete her studies in criminal justice and forensic psychology. Since childhood, she had dreamed of a career in law and was getting closer to her goal. But this was not the only important event in her life. Alisha was soon to become a mother. She was 6 months pregnant. At the same time, she was preparing to be a single mother. When she got pregnant, her boyfriend, the father of the child, did not want to take responsibility for the baby and broke up with Alisha, leaving her to deal with the situation alone. But Alisha didn't worry about it. Of course, she was afraid of being alone with the baby in her arms, but she had strong support from family and friends. She was prepared in advance to fight possible difficulties. Alisha was overjoyed when she found out the baby's gender. She was having a girl. Alisha had even already chosen a name for her little girl, Alisha. She couldn't wait to hold her daughter in her arms. Alisha was morally ready for motherhood. She knew money would be tight since she only had one source of income to support herself and the baby. So during her pregnancy, Alisha bought baby clothes and other things she would need after Ava's birth. Bottles, diapers, onesies, and sleepers. She was lucky to get a job as a florist in a garden center, where she designed the flower shop's displays and arranged bouquets for customers. It was possible to combine her studies with a seasonal job. In the winter, she had time off but was paid properly as this time was considered paid vacation. Alisha had worked at the garden center for about 6 years, starting when she was a teenager. Baby Alisha was expected in the early winter of 2012, just in time before the end of her university exams and her vacation from work. The expectant mother was very fortunate to gradually get used to her new status and be able to spend the first months after birth with her baby. After that, she planned to work again at the garden center, and when Alisha was a bit older, she could pursue a career as a lawyer. For 21-year-old Alisha Bromfield, life seemed to be going well. She was looking forward to graduating as a forensic psychologist and to the birth of her little girl. And Alisha was indeed happy. But she would never experience the major milestones of her life because in the summer of 2012, she became the victim of a truly cruel crime. On the morning of Sunday, August 19, 2012, an employee dialed emergency services, and when the operator answered, he handed the phone to a customer. At that moment, a man in soaking wet clothes reported the crime. He admitted to taking the life of a young pregnant woman in a hotel room the night before. When the dispatcher asked if it had been an accident, the man calmly replied that it had been intentional and then added that he was actually a good person, apart from what he had done last night. Alisha's family would be stunned to learn she was no longer alive. After all, she was the young woman whose murder was reported in a phone call by a stranger. So who was this mysterious man standing at the gas station in soaking wet clothes? And how did the pregnant woman end up in a hotel room at a resort in Door County, Wisconsin? Brian Cooper was 36 years old, 15 years older than Alisha and her direct supervisor. Bromfield and Cooper had worked together for about 5 years. Initially, Cooper seemed like a very nice and friendly person to Alisha. He directly supervised her work and ensured her schedule and tasks were completed. They got along very well and soon became good friends. Sometimes Alisha even walked his dog, so she had a key to Brian's house. When Alisha got the job at the garden center, she was still a teenager and used every opportunity to earn money. When the boss asked her to look after his four-legged friend and walk him, the student saw it as an excuse to please her boss while also getting a small financial reward. She had no idea what was behind this innocent request. However, it soon became clear that Brian liked Alisha as more than just a friend. He was clearly interested in her despite the considerable age difference. The man often made inappropriate remarks about her and sometimes introduced Alisha to new employees as his girlfriend, even though they never had anything together. He used his power and position to control almost every aspect of her life and constantly tried to get closer to her. Cooper repeatedly tried to lure the employee into the warehouse, allegedly for business reasons, to make out with her. He called her on weekends and texted her, getting angry and jealous when he saw other male employees in the company. He sometimes wouldn't let her go to lunch if he found out Bromfield would be eating alone. Brian made it clear in every possible way that he was physically attracted to Alisha. Despite all this, Alisha always rejected the boss's advances and tried to behave discreetly so as not to provoke the man. The fact is, this job suited her perfectly. Because of its seasonal nature, she could study in peace and still get a good salary. Besides, she got the job there when she was only 16 years old. She enjoyed working with flowers and liked interacting with customers. The only thing she didn't like was Brian's insistence on having an affair. At her young age, her boss seemed practically like an old man, and Alisha felt uncomfortable with his advances. But in her childish naivety, she had assumed that Cooper's desire would eventually burn out and he would leave her alone. Alisha was neither at the age nor in a position to properly confront her boss and set personal boundaries. She knew it depended directly on Brian whether she would continue working at the garden center. Moreover, Bromfield was not exactly combative. Her gentle and non-confrontational nature seemed to give her reason to believe the student was just putting on a brave face. In fact, she had made several attempts to explain to Brian that she was not attracted to him as a man, that it wasn't normal to exploit her official position, that she had a completely different taste in men. But Alisha did all this with her usual tenderness and kindness so as not to turn Cooper against her. That's why she never achieved anything. Since she provided no reciprocity, the boss became incredibly cruel and began openly using his position to his advantage. From annoying courtship, he moved on to insults, yelling and swearing at Alisha for the slightest reason, and allowed himself to call her terrible words like spoiled woman and loose woman, of course in a ruder version. He could berate her in front of customers so badly that she would run crying into the back room. The company's top management was well aware of the regional manager's inappropriate behavior but took no action against him. According to court documents, Alisha repeatedly filed complaints about Brian Cooper and his inappropriate behavior, but nothing was done. He was not fired or even suspended, but merely asked to take an anger management course, without anyone checking if he complied with this request. Alisha felt trapped in a job she loved with a hated boss who controlled her every move. She was good at her job, and considering she was only 21 years old and about to become a single mother, this job was especially important to her. Over time, the man did not become calmer. Sometimes he changed his tactics and became the same as before, a sympathetic and understanding friend. And sometimes he was possessed by a demon and could even throw objects at his subordinates. The worst part was that Cooper could simply send Alisha on a business trip and go with her. She tried to set boundaries, but she wasn't very good at it. Alisha didn't dare complain to her parents, believing she had to solve the problem on her own. And so she often felt alone and defenseless against a terrifying boss. Alisha wanted to keep her job. She had to find common ground with her supervisor, and she tried to proceed carefully so she wouldn't be left penniless in the future. The less she tried to upset Brian, the more he complained about her and the more extravagant his demands became. It was the fear of losing her job that put Alisha in the situation that led to the tragedy. Her pregnancy did not deter her boss. He still wanted to fire her or reduce her hours if she didn't obey him. Brian could intentionally schedule a shift on a day when Alisha had a doctor's appointment, forcing her to change her plans. She only had a few months left before going on vacation, and apparently she was ready to put up with some inconveniences and ignore her boss's antics. In August 2012, Cooper began persuading Alisha to accompany him to his sister's wedding in a neighboring state. The sister was getting married in Wisconsin, and Brian was supposed to walk her down the aisle. He assured his employee that he just needed company and nothing else. But when Bromfield refused, he threatened her with dismissal again. Afraid of losing her job, Alisha agreed, but on the condition that they would stay in separate hotel rooms. She really didn't want to go. But now that Bromfield was expecting a baby, she couldn't afford to lose her job. Alisha's first thought was for her little girl. In her heart, she hoped that this trip might soften Brian's harsh approach and he would stop harassing her for a while. Anyway, Brian and Alisha left Plainfield, Illinois early on the morning of Saturday, August 18, 2012, and set off on the 4-hour drive to Door County, Wisconsin, where Cooper's sister's wedding was taking place. Alisha's mother, Sherry, knew how her boss treated her daughter and begged her not to go to this wedding, but she said she had no choice. She promised her mother she would return the day after the wedding. However, she never made it home. On August 19, 2012, Brian Cooper entered a gas station in Door County and asked the employee to use the phone. He informed the dispatcher that he had taken the life of his pregnant employee, Alisha Bromfield. Police officers were immediately dispatched. They arrested Brian Cooper immediately and brought him to the station for questioning. At the same time, another team of police officers was sent to the hotel where Alisha and Brian were staying. It turned out that Cooper had booked one room for the two of them at a hotel in a resort in Door County, but he lied to her when he said they would have separate rooms and that all the other guests were also staying at the hotel. After arriving, Alisha sent a text to her mother saying that she and Brian had argued and would drive home immediately. She didn't like that she had been deceived once again. Alisha's mother, Sherry, was very surprised that Brian would miss the wedding since he was supposed to walk his sister down the aisle. The man himself also apparently realized he had behaved wrongly and apologized to her, citing the lack of available rooms at the resort's hotel. The young people decided to stay for the ceremony anyway because Bromfield didn't want to ruin his vacation and be disrespectful. When Sherry asked her daughter later that day how they were doing, Alisha replied that everything was fine and she and Brian had decided to stay for the celebration, spend the night, and return the next day as planned. The wedding itself went well. The ceremony took place outdoors. Brian fulfilled his duty of walking his sister down the aisle, but his mood left much to be desired. He spent the whole evening dwelling on Alisha's hurtful words that there wouldn't even be friendship between them anymore. Officers sent to a hotel at a resort in Door County entered the room and immediately discovered the body of 21-year-old Alisha Bromfield. She was wrapped in a blanket and a pillow had been carefully placed under her head. At first glance, it looked like she was sleeping, but upon closer inspection, the police officers noticed injuries, bruises, and scratches indicating she had tried to fight back. It was clear she had fought for her life and the life of her unborn daughter until the very end. Forensic experts were called to the crime scene. At the police station, Brian Cooper was questioned. The man said they had argued the day before about a hotel room and that Alisha wanted to go home. Then she decided to stay after all, so as not to ruin Brian's sister's vacation. She stated that when she got home, they would no longer be friends and that she would cease all communication outside of work. Brian was furious. He was hurt by these words. At that moment, the thought came to him to hurt Alisha in the same way, only physically. Brian told the investigators that he and Bromfield had met up and that they got along well. He continued that he had always wanted a relationship with Alisha, that she was supposed to be his mistress. But since she was pregnant by another man, he held back somewhat out of consideration, so they went to the wedding where they took one last photo together. Alisha tried to appear cheerful, but after the ceremony and the party, when they returned to their hotel room, she went to bed to get through the day as there were 2 beds in the room. Meanwhile, Brian kept drinking. He was quite drunk already, but he was aware that as soon as they were back in Illinois, Bromfield would cut off all contact with him. While Alisha slept, he just paced around the hotel room, poured himself alcohol, and went outside to smoke. The anger inside him grew and grew. The man was angry at the sleeping Alisha for rejecting him, and no matter what he did, no matter how he behaved, she always remained unattainable. Uncontrollable rage surged through his entire body. How dare she say she would cut off contact? Brian was not used to a woman rejecting him. He was the one who had power and control over her as he was her supervisor. He was the one who had always had the authority. The fact that Alisha was now standing her ground and saying she'd had enough, that she was tired of being reprimanded and humiliated, raised his wounded male pride to an unprecedented level. With every sip, Cooper lost control of himself. His behavior was incomprehensible. He was afraid of losing Alisha, but he also desperately wanted to hurt her to get revenge, so she would never dare reject him again. The man began running through possibilities in his head for the best way to do it, what he could use to take Alisha's life. At that moment, Alisha woke up as if she sensed the danger emanating from her boss. She went out onto the balcony to get some air, and when she came back, Brian suggested that tomorrow, when they were back home in Plainfield, they should meet up to watch a movie. But Alisha said firmly, no, she would keep her word and cut off all contact with this man. At that moment, a switch flipped in Brian's head. The rejection spurred him on to what he did next. The man literally jumped on Alisha, who was sitting on the bed, pinned her down, wrapped his arms around her neck, and began strangling her. Alisha had not expected such a turn of events, panicked, and began to fight back, trying to loosen Cooper's hands, but finally gave in. She begged him to stop and to think of the baby. In her final moments, Alisha was not thinking of her own life, but of saving her unborn daughter. Nevertheless, he continued his attack. During the struggle, they fell from the bed to the floor, and there Alisha managed to bite his finger. Brian became even angrier and strangled Alisha until she stopped resisting. Instead of calling an ambulance and trying to save the child, Brian stripped Alisha naked and abused the corpse in a fit of unimaginable depravity. To the investigators, he explained that he wanted to see Alisha without her clothes. After satisfying his dirty lust, the man covered her body with a blanket and placed a pillow under her head. The next step in his plan was to kill himself. Cooper did not want to face the consequences of his actions. He did not want to be arrested and put in prison. He would have to face everyone who knew him and somehow explain his transgression. The drunk Brian tried to stab himself with a knife and a corkscrew, but it hurt. Physically, he couldn't hurt himself, so he climbed into the bathroom and fell into a deep unconsciousness. Cooper woke up in the morning. He came out of the bathroom and couldn't even look at the corpse of Alisha, whom he had been chasing after for the past few years. Horrified, he left the hotel and headed to the local bay where he intended to drown himself. Brian swam further out into the water and gave himself to the waves, but his self-preservation instinct kicked in. His body fought for its life on its own, even though he actually wanted to die. So his next attempt to end his life failed. Depressed, Brian waited on shore and walked along the beach until he saw a gas station. When he went in to call the police and turn himself in, water was still dripping from his clothes. That is exactly the story the arrested man told the investigators. When asked by investigators if he had ever had similar outbursts of anger before, Brian said he had never taken anyone's life before. Bromfield was the first victim. He also admitted to abusing his ex-girlfriend and once, during an argument, tying her up so he could have a proper conversation. The ex-girlfriend was so frightened that she didn't dare go to the police and file a report against him because Cooper had never been charged with violent acts before. If she had reported him back then, who knows, maybe Alisha would still be alive. After the discovery of the body in the hotel room, Alisha's family was immediately informed of the incident. The worst part is that the unborn Ava Lucille also died in the womb. The grief of the relatives who were preparing for the imminent birth of a little girl was boundless. Brian Cooper was charged with intentional bodily harm, manslaughter, and abuse of a human corpse. A judge set Cooper's bail at $1 million while he sat in jail awaiting his trial. In addition to Cooper's detailed taped confession, the police continued to work on building a case against him. They managed to gather numerous pieces of evidence that Brian had harassed Alisha professionally and privately for several years. On his computer, they found further evidence, several hidden camera videos. Brian installed a mini camera in the bathroom of his apartment and filmed Alisha using the toilet after walking the dog. He also hid a small recording device in a trash can in the bathroom of the hotel room and filmed her naked as she came out of the shower. All this not only confirmed Brian's obsession with Alisha, but also made clear what a sick, twisted man he really was. She had no idea that her trips to the toilet had been recorded multiple times. The tape even showed the password for Brian's cell phone. It was Alisha's birth date. Despite his confession to investigators, Cooper pleaded not guilty at trial, citing insufficient sanity. He did not deny that he was the perpetrator who took the young pregnant woman's life, but found a justification for it. Cooper's lawyers argued that their client, due to alcohol poisoning, was unable to understand what he was doing. In their opinion, he was too drunk to distinguish between right and wrong, and accordingly, Brian could not be held responsible for his actions that night. That is, he could not be held responsible for the death of Alisha and the death of her unborn child. However, the prosecution found weaknesses in this theory and relied on Cooper's confession. The man could remember in great detail what he had done to Alisha that night, which is not typical of a person under the influence of alcohol. Cooper's unsuccessful attempts to leave the world using various methods also indicate that he was aware of the wrongfulness of his actions. As incredible as it may sound, but the jury could not reach a verdict because 2 of the 12 jurors believed that Cooper, in his intoxicated state, should be acquitted of responsibility for the crime. Everyone was stunned by this outcome of the trial. The decision meant that Alisha's family had to endure a second trial, but the verdict shocked Alisha's mother Sherry the most. She was angered that the jurors were women. It was they who decided that Brian Cooper should not be punished for the massacre of a young woman and her unborn child. And the reason for this was that he simply had a few too many drinks. Sherry believed that with such laws, anyone could commit a serious crime and get away with it if they had a good drink beforehand. She did not want another family to have to endure this pain, and she also did not want young people who were victims of drunk criminals to be buried. So Alisha Bromfield's mother took action. Sherry was so outraged by the outcome of the case that she led a campaign to change the laws. Together with other family members and her daughter's friends, she spoke out against this type of defense strategy, which was actually permitted in the U.S. court system. The team led by Sherry spread the word and tried to raise public awareness by writing letters to local and higher officials, creating online petitions, and holding meetings with legislators in Wisconsin. And fortunately, the hard fight for justice brought results after some time. In the spring of 2014, a year and a half after Alisha's death, Governor Scott Walker signed a law that officially removed voluntary intoxication from Wisconsin's law. Sherry successfully achieved changes to the laws in states. However, these changes did not apply to Brian, as the crime occurred before the laws were passed. Since the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict the first time, Cooper had to be retried for the massacre of Alisha Bromfield. The trial took place in May 2014. As mentioned, Brian's defenders could still cite drunkenness as a mitigating factor during sentencing. At Brian Cooper's second trial, the jurors again learned of his pathological obsession with Alisha and how he abused his power as her boss. They saw hidden camera footage and listened to Cooper's confession, where he detailed his decision to take Alisha's life, despite her pleas and concerns for her child. This time the jury found him guilty on all counts. Brian Cooper was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Most likely, this man will never walk free again. After her daughter's death, Sherry filed a lawsuit against Alisha's employers. The woman found out that the woman had repeatedly complained about mistreatment and harassment in the workplace by her direct supervisor, regional manager Brian Cooper. It turned out that Bromfield was not the first employee to complain to management about the man's inappropriate behavior. Even before Alisha was hired at the garden center, there was a young employee named Jessica. She had just graduated from high school. It was her first job. And Brian initially paid attention to her and then began to show inappropriate interest. When she rejected Cooper's advances, he began to interfere with her work. Unlike Alisha, Jessica did not tolerate the bullying and wrote a complaint against the man. When management took no action, the employee had no choice and quit. Sherry filed a lawsuit against the company, accusing it of negligence that led to her daughter's death. After all, if the company had responded to the complaints and taken measures to protect female employees from Brian's harassment, they would not have been harmed. The company argued that the crime did not occur at the branch and that it was not obligated to monitor employees around the clock. Sherry's lawsuit was initially dismissed, but this decision was later overturned on appeal. After 2 grueling trials, Alisha's mother did not want other parents to have to go through a similar experience. Sherry felt overwhelming anger and guilt for failing to protect her daughter and granddaughter. Knowing that anger is destructive, she was able to transform it. The grief-stricken mother found the strength to help others. Sherry's family not only fought for legislative changes but also founded the Purple Project. The organization set itself the task of preserving the memory of Alisha and Ava by giving people in the North love and hope. The organization was called Purple because that was Alisha's favorite color. During the court proceedings, friends and family of the victim were prohibited from wearing clothing with Alisha's picture in the courtroom, so the relatives wore purple clothing as a sign of love and support. The Purple Project organization provides psychological help to parents who have lost their children and supports single mothers in need, both morally and financially. The Purple Project accepts not only financial funds but also donations of toys, diapers, and baby clothes. The most incredible part of this story is that Sherry, in her mission to help others, teamed up with Kelly Stryker. Stryker is a social worker specializing in mental health, child abuse, and domestic violence. But that's not all she has to offer. Incredibly, Kelly is Cooper's sister who originally testified in defense of her brother at the trial, and although she defended Brian, it bothered her that he refused to take responsibility for his actions. Yes, that also happens in life. Stryker was touched by Sherry's mission to keep Alisha's memory alive and became her inspiration. Kelly herself approached Sherry and offered her help with the Purple Project to do something to undo what her brother had done. If you liked the video, please give it a like. That helps a lot with spreading it. Also, leave a comment to support the channel and recommend the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Thanks for watching and take care of yourself.